How are you, all of you? It's good to see you. I've got to get close to Scott because he's the one with the mic, and so that they can hear me. Welcome to FEBE, Fostering Entrepreneurial Business Education. For those of you who are new, we meet, this networking event meets every Wednesday from 10 to 11. The coffee is provided to us by our sponsor, Dunkin' Donuts, Dave Sisson, who's a franchisee, who also has Dunkin' Donuts in Amherst on 158, or on 58, excuse me, Route 58, and also in Cleveland on West 150th. So if you're ever in the area, stop by for coffee or donuts or a sandwich, and thank them for sponsoring FEBE. We're now in our third year of their sponsorship, and we appreciate that. Today we have Scott Zitek, who's from the Fab Lab. The Fab Lab is located right here on campus. For those of you who are not aware of the Fab Lab, you should go over there. I think you'll be very surprised as to what is available on our campus. A little unknown fact for many people is that the Fab Lab that we have here on our campus was the second Fab Lab on a college campus in the country. The first one was at MIT, and the way we got the second Fab Lab is a group of people from the college went to MIT, saw the Fab Lab there, talked with them, took notes, etc., came back and reproduced it here, and when they got it open, they then didn't know what to do. So they called MIT and said, okay, now that we have it up and running, what do we do? And there's been a long history with the two institutions on that. Also, last year, I was invited to teach in Finland for a week and went to Lillibet Academy, which is a university over in Finland. And they actually had a Fab Lab that they had just opened. So it's becoming very popular to open these Fab Labs. The Fab Lab here on our campus is, because we are a community college, it's open to the entire community. You can go into the Fab Lab, you can use it for producing products, and people do come in, produce products there, then take them home and sell them. So it's open, there's no charge, all you have to do is bring in the supplies that you're going to use. But I don't want to take any more of Scott's thunder, so please give a warm welcome to Scott.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to tell you about the Fab Lab. I like to tell anybody that I can find about it. I'm walking down the street and I'll just stop people and tell them about it. So you'll see that I'm quite excited about the Fab Lab. Anyways, I'm the coordinator. I've been doing that since we originally built the lab. And I brought some pictures to kind of give you a feel for what the Fab Lab is and how it links up with other Fab Labs like it around the world. When we started it, we were thinking, oh, this is going to be some high-tech equipment and we'll be able to do some pretty neat things with it. But I think what we found over the years that it's more of the network, this community of Fab Labs around the world, and the opportunities to work with MIT and to be involved in the cutting edge of a lot of things that you're seeing out there. When they started the Fab Labs, I think it was part of a research project. They were looking into basically the equivalent of the Star Trek replicator. I don't know if you've ever seen that show. It's science fiction. They walk up to something that kind of looks like a vending machine. They say what they want, and it just magically appears. It assembles it molecule by molecule, so it can make just about anything. So MIT was doing research into how close are we to that? How can we go from the bits of the computers into the atoms of the real world? And how transparent and easy can we make that process? The closest thing we have to that nowadays, I guess for the most part, is the 3D printer. We're used to printing on a piece of paper where we tell the computer what we want it to look like, but it's kind of boring. It's just some print on a piece of paper. The 3D printer can go from a file that you had drawn up to a physical object that's three-dimensional and has properties that you can test and work with. And this has evolved. I mean, this was really rare way back when we started the Fab Labs, but now they're selling them at Sam's Club, and you can go to Staples and have it done as a service. So I think this is very similar into how the computers are. Well, it used to be they'd say there'd be 4 computers in the world and they'd be owned by giant corporations and governments and things like that. And now you probably have 4 computers at home, or maybe 4 computers on you. This is the same idea. As what changed all that is that they took this technology that was traditionally available only to large corporations. It was expensive, it was hard to use, you know, so the companies that were really big, that could afford to do the research, and they could afford to invest in it, they were the only ones that had access to it. What MIT discovered was that if they took that same equipment and they made it available to the masses for anybody to use, and we're not going to question what you're making or why you're making it. It doesn't have to be something important, that they did amazing things. So just like we have personal computers, this is personal fabrication. So that's a big thing that I think that MIT did with this, is they discover this idea of empowering people to be able to make the things that they envision. So they could do proofs of concepts, they can make personal things that they can't buy at the store, and things like that. Along the way, since there's so many Fab Labs, we're starting to see all these other opportunities to share and network and to be able to distribute the way that we do things. So there's a lot to it. Anyways, as I mentioned, there's Fab Labs all over the world, and I have to keep updating my presentations because it's changing so quickly. The number of labs doubles every year and a half or something like that. So there is over 450 labs around the world now, and one of the things that I always thought was kind of interesting about this is from the outside they look very unique. You know, this one is, you know, above the Arctic Circle, and they have, you know, darkness for 23 hours a day or something like that, and it used to be where they would herd sheep in Norway. And another one has palm trees, but if you go inside of it and look at the pictures there, it looks just like in our lab. You've got users, they're all doing the same thing, they're using similar equipment, and that's what I think was kind of amazing. The first lab you'll hear was in Setsi, Tent City down in Boston, and the second one was in India, and that's a picture of the guy that started that. I was able to go to India, so there's a picture of me in India working on a antenna that you could make yourself out of a repurposed router. So if we went to Staples, we could buy like a $40 router, and I could make an antenna that could communicate over a mile. And it was just made with chicken wire and some wood. It was pretty impressive. They later went to evolve with that to the point where they could get a satellite connection to many homes and schools in Afghanistan. So they try to figure out how they can use this technology for good. So there's a story behind a lot of the things that you'll see in Fab Labs. Anyways, this is a map. Like I said, it's really getting difficult to show you all of the different Fab Labs around the world, but you see we've pretty much got it covered. There are Fab Labs in just about every country, and although we had the second one in the United States, they've become very popular. I would have to guess there's probably 20 in Ohio right now. I know of at least I'm thinking 5 that have started in this region within the last couple of months, so they are really gaining speed. Anyways, if you're curious about this is the best website to go to. This is the official website right now where they kind of try to keep track of what the Fab Labs are, where the official labs are located, who the contact people are, and things like that. All right. Like I said, it's a moving target, so it's sometimes difficult.
Excuse me, is that the last address .io?
Yep, .io. It's a strange extension. I think maybe it has to do with computers. I'm not sure. Yep, so it's just www.fablabs.io. Anyways, a little bit of history because I'm really proud of the fact that we were in this before it was cool. Like I said, we had the second Fab Lab in the United States. The first one was in Tent City. It was like downtown in a real depressed area. They just celebrated, I don't know which anniversary it was, but it was a pretty big deal. Ours is unique to some extent because it's open to the public. It's one of the rules of the charter, but a lot of the Fab Labs have a hard time doing that. Like there's one out in GE Nela Park, which they want to be open to the public, but it's surrounded by fence, and there's a high school there, and they've got lots of limits. But it is one thing that we've always tried to stay true to. We are open about 25 hours a week, days, evenings, and weekends. Saturdays is probably the busiest day of all. And the only reason I'm not open more is because it's hard to find people people to staff the lab when it's open. So we would like to be open more than that. We do offer credit and non-credit classes. If you wanted to learn how to use the Fab Lab, I have a 1 credit hour course that runs just about every semester. It's 10 weeks long, you meet once a week, and it shows you the basics. Here's the software, here's what the equipment is, here's how you use it, here's what you can do with it, and things like that. And probably the most exciting part about it is most of the equipment is free to use. So if you bring your own materials in, you bring cardboard, wood, plastic, whatever, you can work on a lot of the machines for free. So that's what we mean by empowering it. It allows people to have access to the equipment they obviously couldn't afford on their own. I don't know if you're aware of this, but several years past, we had President Obama came in. He actually went through the lab twice already, which I think is quite amazing for a sitting president. This is an example. We had been working on the idea of could we teach topics like geometry using the Fab Lab. So these are students from early college, and they would come in and apply some of the geometry lessons they were learning to things they were making in the Fab Lab, and it was quite successful. The standard lab equipment, I have some pictures. I brought some examples. I don't know how well you'll be able to see them, but I can put them out and you can look at them later. These are the standard things that you would find in most Fab Labs. MIT had chosen them because they have a lot of bang for the buck. They're fairly inexpensive, fairly reliable, and they're very flexible. So we not only use them for what they're designed for, we use them for a lot of other things. So that's the part that is constantly evolving. If you have 450 labs around the world using this equipment, they come up with very creative ways to use them, to combine them, to get things done, to be able to make things. All right? But I have some examples here that I could show you of some of this different equipment. So the first thing is a sign cutter. It's basically a computer-controlled razor blade. So we draw lines on the screen, and wherever there's a line, that's where it runs the razor blade. So it can either lift up the razor blade so it doesn't cut, or it drops it so it does cut. Whenever I take a picture of this, though, it would be rather boring. It would just be a piece of material coming out of it that would look the same as when it went in. What you don't see when you run the machine is there is thin razor cut lines. So they're so tiny, they're hard to see. What this is an example of is after it was done cutting it, I peeled away the parts of the vinyl sticker that we didn't want. So I threw those away and I put it back in the machine. So this isn't what it looks like when it comes out of the machine, but at least it's an example of it. So this would be an example of something made on the vinyl cutter. Usually we work with one color of vinyl, like the blue. This is accomplished by doing layers and layers of different cuts. So we have somebody in the lab that has a lot of patience and time to be able to pull those things off. Like I said, we use these pieces of equipment for many different things. This is a piece of copper film, so it's very similar to the vinyl sticker, except for it's conductive, and it has an adhesive that's conductive also. We can make circuit boards with this. But unlike most circuit boards where they're rigid, this can be flexible, so I can make multiple layers and things like that. In the video, you may have noticed she was showing you something that was on glass that was kind of shiny like this. That was a Wi-Fi antenna. So they could use the glass to kind of separate the antennas that are made out of the copper. So here again, a lot of things that you can do with it. I've even made microfluidic devices like flexible thermometers and things using the vinyl cutter. But it's made for doing the things you see over there on the right. So we could do things like the signs you see on the college vehicles, the signs you see around the campus, and people use it to make all sorts of other, garage sale, car wash signs, whatever they want. This is the Roland Modella mill, probably the least used piece of equipment. It's very small. It's like the size of a printer, but it's very precise. So this same company sells this. They also sell equipment that's used for making things like jewelry molds, teeth, for the dentist. They can make artificial teeth and things like that. So its claim to fame is that it's very precise. It's not very large. The biggest thing that we do with it, you can cut molds. So this would be a foam material. It's fairly soft. It's not very durable, so it wouldn't be usable as a final product. But we could use that just to show somebody what the three-dimensional shapes look like. So that machine can cut parts about this size, as you can see, very precisely, three-dimensionally objects and things like that. The big thing that we use it for, though, is to make circuits. So this would be an example of a circuit that was made using the Modella mill. We start out with a piece of normal copper. It's not conductive on the back, and it is conductive on the top. And we remove, by machining away, the copper that we don't want. When you solder that together, you end up with a complete circuit. So this circuit here, it might not look like much, but it's basically a computer. So there's a chip there that's been programmed. It tells it how to react, what to do. It can run multiple sequences and things like that. And what amazes me is this whole board probably cost $1 or $2 to make. So this was the type of thing you might use as part of a prototype to prove a proof of concept, to make a one-of-a-kind item or whatever. And you can do it very easily using the components and the equipment that you'd find in the Fab Lab. Probably the most popular piece of equipment of all in the Fab Lab is the lasers. Our lasers are not very powerful. We have a small one called Mini that's 25 watts, and we have a larger one that's 40 watts. Think of a 40-watt bulb. It's not very bright, but it concentrates all that area in one space. So there's a couple of things that you could do with it. It works with a lot of kind of organic materials. So materials like cloth and wood and cardboard and things like that, it will not cut metal. So that's one of the big limits of it. There's also some materials we can't put into it because if it burns them, it will create toxic gases. So vinyl would be an example of that type of material. But with that machine, we can do things like engraving. This is somebody who was experimenting with the idea of engraving on denim, and it gives you a pretty neat look. So that's very easy to do. You just take a photograph, send it over, and it laser engraves it in it. What I like to use the laser for is to cut things like cardboard. I thank Dell for sending me lots of materials. We have an endless supply of this stuff, it appears. And this is an example of a small table that I had made. And you don't want to waste a lot of time and material making it just to find out it's not going to work or that there's some flaw. So we typically will cut it out of cardboard or wood. So this is an example out of cardboard. This would be an example out of a really thin wood. And you can see that you can put it together, see if it works, see if you need to make any changes, and when you're done, you go to the next level. We have another machine that can cut wood, and this would be the example of that same design. I made some practice cuts. This is what one of the legs would look like when you put it together. Once I've got it all figured out, then I send it over, and it actually makes tables, and we can make one table or many. So that's one of the things I really enjoy, is going from the design to a finished, functional object. But the lasers, like I said, we do a lot with them. People engrave with them. One of the things that's probably most impressive is the lasers are so precise that we can predict for the amount of material that's removed by the laser beam, and you can make things like this. This is a press-fit jewelry box, and it is so precise at such high tolerances that it will snap together, and just friction holds it together. So one of the things we'll do is make friction fits. That way, if you want to take it apart, if it breaks, if you want to modify it, you can. Another thing that's starting to evolve is this whole realm of what they call digital joints. So we can make joints like this is a snap fit that was laser cut. We can make things like this on the laser pretty easily, but if you were to try to do that manually, whittling it out or whatever by hand, it would be impossible. So they're starting to come up with new ways to build things. How do I assemble things? How do I make it easy to put together, possible to take it apart, and things like that. So I think that's kind of interesting that there's research that can be done in Fab Labs too. We also have a number of items that I would refer to as limited access equipment. This is equipment that, because it's unsafe, we have a router that cuts wood, and it has to be strong enough to cut wood, so therefore it can be more dangerous than some of the other equipment that we have. We might need to have to protect you or protect the equipment. If you make a mistake, you could break it. We just got a new machine that is really easy to use, but if somebody drops it, it would be very expensive to fix. So things like that. And probably one of the biggest one is the high cost of materials. I said you could bring your own materials. Some of the machines use unique material that you just can't go and buy from Walmart. So we have to supply it, and therefore it's expensive. And if you're going to use that equipment, we typically either do it as a service, or you make an appointment to come in when somebody could work side by side with you. And we don't always have somebody available to just do that whenever somebody walks in the door. All right. This would be an example of it. This machine we didn't get for a while. When we first built the lab, we didn't have it, and we additionally added it. And what is exciting about this is it's a big machine. Most of the stuff we have, I said we're kind of limited by material, but we're also limited by size. This machine takes it to the next level. The piece of wood that you see inside of the machine is 4 foot by 8 foot, so a full sheet of plywood. So with this, we could easily make things like furniture, full-size chairs and cabinets and things like that. So this takes it to the next level. It really allowed us to make bigger, more usable objects than we had up to that point. But it's computer controlled, and believe it or not, it's very similar to the Modella mill. It's the same thing, just much bigger and stronger. It's even programmed very similar. So that's getting to be fairly common. There's some stuff in the Fab Lab that not everybody knows we have. It's in a cabinet, or it's not something that everybody notices it's sitting there. One of the things we've had for a while is a 3D scanner. Kind of looks like a metal lunchbox, but it's got 2 cameras in it. It's got laser beams, and you set an object on a turntable in front of it, and it will shine light on it, and it will be able to completely determine all of its dimensions. So most of what we do in Fab Labs is how do I go from the bits of the computers to the atoms of the real world. This goes the other way around. So I start with a physical object I already have, whether it's an object I have a one of a kind, we stop making it and I can't find another one, or maybe I've molded it by hand and it's very unique and organic. What this does is it scans it in and it converts it into bits. So the image you see on the very right is what's called a point cloud. It's all of the dimensions that are related to all of that surface. So it's kind of a time-consuming process to scan in an object, and there's lots of limitations, but it does get the job done if you have enough patience. But that wasn't good enough. We got kind of frustrated by that one. It could only work with small objects. It was very time-consuming. So within the last, I'd say, probably been about 6 months, the Lorain County Manufacturing Council was nice enough to make a donation so that we could buy one of these. So we now have what's called a GoScan 3D scanner, and as you can see, it's handheld. So you hold it and you point it at the object and it shines what kind of looks like a barcode. But what's amazing about this is that as you're shining it on the object, all of the information is appearing on the computer in pretty much real time. So if you miss a spot, if there's part of the object you don't have in the computer, you just go back over it and it will add it to it. So you can interact with it. This also scans much larger objects. It's possible to scan something, well, they say as big as your head or bigger. So you could scan a whole person, but usually you use objects about this big, and it's a very quick process. That is a huge change in the technology, and we're very lucky to have it. This is something else that we've had for a while. Like I said, the idea behind Fab Labs was that we would have that Star Trek replicator where you could walk up to a machine and it would just make anything you want. Now, the closest we have to it is this machine here. This is a commercial 3D printer. You send it a 3-dimensional file and it prints the object out of plastic. It makes it out of ABS, which is the same thing as Lego blocks, and it's kind of limited. You can only make plastic parts that have color, but it's really amazing what you could do with it. So I brought some examples, but the first thing I wanted you to see is how it works. This is the material that we start out with. It starts out in a spool. We can only buy it from the company that makes it, and we use 2 types of this. There's this here, which is the modeling material, so this would be the ABS plastic, and our machine also has what's called soluble support, and you probably can't see it in the picture, but there's some black parts here that used as scaffolding and to fill gaps and things like that. That will dissolve away, so it's brittle, it snaps off, and if we put it in a tank, it'll just completely dissolve out, and that allows us to do some pretty amazing things. So the example we usually use is this. This is a wrench. The black that you see is the support material. So the very first thing it does is it melts this through what's like a hot glue gun into a really thin, hair-thin thread, and then it lays it down one layer at a time. So it keeps lowering the table and working the object bigger and bigger. So the black would be the support material, and then the yellow is this ABS plastic here. We purposely stopped this one in the middle so you can see that there's some different parts to this assembly. You can see places where the 2 parts don't come together and things like that. When it's done, we peel it off of the plate and it looks like this. So you have the support material, you have the plastic, and in between all the nooks and crannies there's also support material. And then when it comes out of the tank, it looks like this. And what's amazing about this is that it's functional. So most processes used in manufacturing are subtractive. You start out with a big chunk of wood, you cut away everything you don't want, and you end up with something. This is additive. We build it from a start material, and this is only going to evolve. It's going to get better materials. It's going to get faster. It's going to get cheaper. It's going to get easier to use. And they're starting to get into different materials. Just like you had a black and white printer, now we have what would be the equivalent of a color printer, but it prints different color material, or maybe materials with different properties, where part of it could be rigid and other parts of it might be flexible. You might have read online, they talk about 4D printing. So 3D is the dimensions here, but the fourth dimension would be the material, where you could give it properties where maybe it be conductive in part of it, insulative, maybe you heat it up and it bends to a shape. It could actually assemble itself based upon the properties of the materials. MIT would like to see eventually that this works a lot like maybe Lego blocks. Think of Lego blocks at a much smaller scale. This is still extruding things in an analog fashion. They want to build things with discrete components that you could unassemble, and eventually you get down to the molecular level, which that's going to take them a little while, but they're doing pretty good. Anyways. We also have an electronics station. I showed you an example of some of the circuits made with that. So the electronics station, we have the soldering irons, the components to make some of the systems. We have like a stock inventory that all of the Fab Labs use, and it's mainly involved with projects that we work together with one another. So I don't have everything, but I do have a pretty good selection of common components to build things. We also have what we refer to as messy fab, and this has been evolving because of the need to make things that are stronger, more durable, or whatever. I have an example of this. What we would normally do is use, as you can see, that top part would be cut out of, let's say, wax or foam or wood, and that's the first mold cavity. If it's small, I could cut it on the Modella. If it's larger, I could cut it out on the ShopBot. I then mix up and pour some type of rubber in it. This is a urethane rubber, and the benefit of it is that it's very flexible and reusable, where I could make many, many parts from just one of these. And then the white portion you see in the middle would be an example of a part. So this is what one of the parts look like that I make. And the neat thing about this is I could go from a machine that could only cut wax to a part that's made out of, let's say, metal. Because once I make this mold, there's lots of different materials that you could put inside of here to get different properties. Urethane rubbers and metals, and this thing here is a type of, it's not quite plaster, it's much more durable than that. So there's a lot of options when it comes to molding and casting. And the other thing is composites. We're starting to get more and more into that. I think we're going to get into carbon fiber. We've already done, it's kind of like fiberglassing, but it uses burlap and tree sap, so it's much safer for the environment and for the people that are using it. So environmentally conscious too. And it's easy to use. This is Everett the Wonder Dog from MIT, and if he can use the Fab Lab, so can you. So we don't have him around. I should borrow him. That would help solve some of the problems of us being open. But I wanted to show you just in general how this works, that basically the way that you use the equipment in the Fab Lab is a lot how you print this. So have you ever printed a piece of paper before? You basically draw it up on your screen, and then you go to the print menu and you say print. This works the same way. So I go to the print menu, that's what's on the top of the screen there, but when it asks me to select the printer, I don't say go to the HP printer. I don't say go to the inkjet or something like that. I tell it to go to the Epilogue engraver, which is one of the lasers in the room. So the equipment in the room is listed in the menu of all the printers, and you just pick the printer that you want to go to, or in this case the laser. And then what it would normally do is it would pop up a screen and it would say things like, do you want that stapled? Do you want it printed double side? Do you want it black and white or color? This is a laser, so it needs different characteristics. So we tell it whether we want to cut through or engrave. And then there's different settings. The settings here would be for engraving. The settings here would be for cutting. And you go, oh, that's way too complicated. All that stuff's on charts. We know what the materials are. We've already figured out these settings. So we know what is the setting you use for cardboard, what is the setting you use for acrylic. So all you do is look it up on a chart, move the sliders to set it up, and send it over. So we can show people how to use things like the laser cutter within a matter of, 10, 15 minutes. Using the software, maybe a little bit more challenging, but that just depends upon your previous experience. Talking about software, we have a lot of commercial software in the Fab Lab, and that's not all that traditional. Part of that's because we're an educational institution. If people are taking classes, we already teach classes in SolidWorks and things like that. They want to use the software they've already learned. They don't want to learn something else. So we typically use the software that's most commonly used in industry, even though it's not all that cheap. So we do have commercial versions of SolidWorks, which is an expensive, commercial software. But for everything that we do, there is free software available to do it. So you don't have to use this software. You could work at home using whatever software you already own, or we could tell you where to find free software. And then once you had your files, then you could bring them in and use our software to send it over to the machines. So that's the one thing that MIT's been working on. Another thing that they have is something called Fab modules, which it doesn't help you do the design yet. But what it does help you do is just about any common file format, you bring it in and it will be able to create the file for just about any machine in the lab. So it's like a universal interpreter between the file format you have and the machine you want to make it with. So that's something they've been working on, and that's a good example of the research that MIT has been working on, how to make this technology more capable, easier to use, and we get to firsthand experience their progress and test it out and be able to improve it and things like that. I wanted to mention a little bit about the graphics because most people aren't aware of this. There's two types of graphics we commonly use in the Fab Lab. One is what's called vector graphics, and vector graphics are unique because they're lines and arcs. So if you're using a software like AutoCAD, you usually click somewhere and you drag a line somewhere else. This is what we typically use. It defines the paths. Wherever you have a line is where the razor blade goes on the vinyl cutter. Wherever you have a line is where the laser cuts. So this is how we tell the machines what to do. We don't type in a bunch of commands. We just show it what we want. It's what's called WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So whatever we draw on the screen should be exactly what the machine makes. But that's the most common format. The other format that we'll sometimes use would be either vectors. Think of it as like coloring, is once I've drawn these shapes, I could have the software color it. But more commonly, we'll run into what's called a bitmap. Bitmaps is the format like your phones and cameras take. So if you take a digital photo with your camera or your phone, it's going to be a bitmap. We can't do a lot of things with it, but we can do things like engraving. So this here would have just started out as a photograph. I can take a picture of you in the lab, and I can engrave it on a piece of cloth. That's all there is to it. But the majority of the designs we do, if we want to make something like cut it out, we need it in this format. Just something to think about when you're looking for software, and you'll realize why we need different software. It just depends what you're doing. All right, this is a software that we use for the ShopBot, and it is a little more complicated. That's why we typically will walk people through it. But this is kind of neat because a lot of the things we do in the Fab Lab, you can see how this evolves into the things in real life. So this same software that we use could also be used to run a giant industrial, what's called a CNC machine. So the machines that cut metal and make parts in industry, this is the software you program it with. So it could program the ShopBot, the Modella mill, or a big industrial piece of equipment using the same software. It's what's called CADCAM. On the left side of the software is where we do the drawings, like this here represents the lines of what we want to make. And on the right side is how we tell it what to do with it. Oh, use a drill bit or a mill or whatever. So that tells it how to cut it out, whether to cut a pocket or just an outline or something like that. But this is about as tough as it gets. That's probably the toughest piece of equipment we've got. Yes?
Can I add that you have computers in your lab that we could use?
Oh, absolutely.
You can use your USB drive to create it there and keep it stored on your USB drive so you can take it with you.
You could do everything in the lab, but some people are like, well, I don't want to spend a lot of time there. If you're making a complicated design or whatever, you do have the option to work on home. You would just, whatever software you're comfortable with. And I'm excited about this. In about a year, our Fab Lab is going to get even better. Our Fab Lab, back in like 2005, 2006, it started in an office. It was a small space, about a fourth of the size of this, if we're lucky. We quadrupled the size of it, and then we immediately outgrew it. So I'm happy to announce, if you hadn't already heard about this, that we're putting an addition on the front of our building that'll be toward the front of the campus. It's going to have a new entrance, that's right here, and we're building a new and better Fab Lab. So most people, when they look at this, even the people in our division, have no idea what this diagram is. It's nice and colorful, though. So I have some renderings that I could show you. This is what the latest versions, I'm sure this isn't going to be the final version of it, but this is what they were working on as what the front of the college would be looking like. So if you looked at the college center, this would be to the very right, where the PC building is on the very edge to the right side. So we have a new entrance, so people aren't sliding in through the back, service door or whatever. There'll be a new entrance to the college, and the Fab Lab is just to the left of those big doors. And this is what it looks like in the lobby as you come in through those main doors. And that's what the new Fab Lab would look like. So it would be a much more accessible space. Right now it's kind of like a classroom, and we want to make it more like a library or something like that because it's open to the public. We want to make it inviting and easy to get into. So it's a bigger space. We're looking at getting additional equipment and being able to handle larger groups. That's one of the problems we have is we have large groups want to come in, and we can only handle like 12 right now. We've also relocated what we call the messy fab, which is the machines that create sawdust and fumes and sticky residue and stuff like that. So it'll be segregated so that it's not getting on all the other really expensive equipment that we have it next to now. And as I said, part of this is that we do plan on buying additional equipment. So we're at the phase now where we're trying to figure out what should we buy. You know, what would be the equipment that would be most usable. And I think the big thing to keep in mind is that we want to have equipment that is easy to use for the general public, that they can't really break and that, you know, it doesn't take hours and hours to figure out how to use. But we also plan on buying more industrial equipment that would be that limited access stuff. So we can make things that we can't make otherwise, things that most companies can't make. For example, a water jet cutter, which could cut through, you know, thick plates of steel, glass, marble, composites. A lot of companies don't have those, and we would be able to have one. But you know, along the line, we've got some other things. In the Fab Labs, a lot of the Fab Labs have embroider machines to make wearables. So we do plan on getting one of those because they're really cheap compared to most other pieces of equipment. But if you have any ideas, you know, talk to me, send me an email, and we can look into it. Yes?
Question.
Sure.
Do you have an additive way to create metal parts?
Not yet, but in the very near future, we plan to.
Will it be a 3D printer?
Yes, probably.
Okay.
The versions we were looking at right now, if I 3D print something, I can make a mold from it, and then I could use the mold to make a metal part, but we want to be able to print directly to metal. So that's one of the things we are planning on getting.
Okay, that's more expensive and farther down the road, I imagine.
Well, this will be within a year. They are supposed to open this building up about a year from now.
Second question, if I may. Your limited access items, what is generally required to get access to those? Is it somebody shows you, you show that you understand, and they let you go, or do you need to take a course?
The limited access stuff, two examples of the variations of that would be the 3D printer, which is real easy to use. I mean, if you've used a printer, you can print. It's expensive though, so we want to make sure people aren't printing things that won't come out. So we do that as a service. People send us the file, we charge them based upon the amount of material that's used. So we're not trying to make a big profit, we're just trying to cover the cost of the materials and the service on the piece of equipment. So if you want 3D printing, you know, that's how you do it. We could walk through it with you if you wanted to, but most people just send us the files. And the other equipment would be like the ShopBot. And the ShopBot, the way we typically do that is you come in during open lab hours and we help you use the Aspire software somehow to create the program for it. Like I said, it's more involved than most. And then once you're ready, then we make an appointment for somebody to work with you. And they just run the machine, they set it up, they'll walk you through it. If you did get to the point where we felt that you were capable of running it on your own safely, you could probably use it during open lab hours. But very few people actually put that kind of effort into it. They're happy to just work with us. What it really comes down to, our main goal all the time with the Fab Lab was always, we wanted to make it accessible and we wanted to make sure that you didn't hurt yourself or anybody else and that you don't hurt the equipment. If we could avoid doing that, then we encourage people to, you know, work on their own, experiment, help each other. So I think that's the key. We really want you to do it yourself if you can. All right, that answer the question? Sure.
Scott, you mentioned about the classes, the introductory class, I assume is non-credit?
No, it's credit, but you can audit it. A lot of people will do that. 1 credit hour, it's 10 weeks. It's usually the last 10 weeks of a semester, and we usually offer both a day and a night section because it's very popular. A lot of the faculty and staff and students will take it. One of the things I'm working on would be a full 1-year certificate and a 2-year degree in digital fabrication. So it eventually will expand much farther than that to just 1 class.
And if we want to sign up for that, how do we go about that?
Through the normal process of the college. The class is called AETC 192. I didn't put that down there. AETC 192, Introduction to Personal Fabrication. And I usually put up flyers around the lab, so if you do come to the lab, you'll see advertisements for it and you can get more information.
Any other questions? Scott, thank you very much.
Sure, no problem. So I'll leave these examples out if anybody wants to look at them. And I also had a couple of handouts if you wanted some more information about Fab Labs in general or our Fab Lab. All right.
We look forward to seeing you next week. Be sure to bring a friend or two or a dozen, as many as you would like. We'd like to eventually push out that wall to have it in both rooms on that. In the meantime, have a good day, good weekend, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.